Thank you for joining us for Merced Paint Night. I'm Colton Dennis, director of the MAC, the Multicultural Arts Center in downtown Merced. And here I am live from my kitchen. I hope you were able to get some amazing takeout from your favorite restaurant before tonight's event. Typically, we have our paint nights, which we call Arts and Spirits, at the MAC on the third Friday of every month, an event that is hosted by the Arbor Gallery, a co-op of very talented local artists. Unfortunately, because of this current global pandemic, we had to put our Arts and Spirits on hold for now. So tonight, we bring you our virtual version of our Arts and Spirits. We hope you enjoy. Also, don't forget to post a photo of your painting with the hashtag Merced Paint Night on our Facebook or Instagram pages to be eligible for the People's Choice Award. The painting with the most likes will receive some MAC swag, which includes a gift certificate for two for an actual live and in-person Arts and Spirits for when the MAC is open to the public again, which we all hope is in the very near future. All who post their paintings will be entered into a raffle. The winner will receive the original signed painting of tonight's subject, Moo-ced or Cows on Main Street. Also, if you would like to give a donation of any size to the MAC, please visit artsmerced.org. Even a small donation can make a huge impact. Thank you. So without further ado, your instructor for tonight, local artist Lisa Gilliland-Viney.
Hello everybody, I'm Lisa Gilliland-Viney. I'm Director of Education at the MAC, and I'm also a local artist. And we would like to welcome you very, very much to our first virtual paint night. Tonight I'm going to be showing you how to paint this painting of Cows on Main Street. It's something that's been in my mind for some time. I always thought it would be a fun painting to do. And now with reports of animals going back into their native environments, I thought this would be a really fun opportunity to bring this painting to life. First of all, I'm going to show you how to draw cows, and I hope you've had a chance to kind of work through some of the background. So I'll show you how to do the cows. Hopefully you've had some time to think about how to draw the buildings and the trees. If you haven't and you're worried about it, I suggest you might want to do something like this. This was my first paint night live. Of course, we didn't do virtual paint nights back then, but I'm a member of the Arbor Gallery as well. And for on the third Friday of every month, we present a paint night live in the main gallery, and all proceeds from the paint night go towards keeping the Arts Center up and running. And so this was my first paint night demo. What I suggest you can do is just don't worry about the painting the theater and all of the architecture and the street. Instead, you can paint a field behind your cows. It's much, much easier, and it still is a lot of fun to do. For that field, I actually added 2 additional colors to my palette. I had cadmium yellow and gold ochre or yellow ochre. So those colors are useful for making a sort of dry grass look, along with a little bit of burnt sienna. But tonight we're going to be doing this version, which has the theater and trees on the other side. Of course, it's simplified greatly so that we will be able to get through the whole painting in the time that we have. Before we get started, I want to show you how to draw cows because they're really fun to do. I teach children's art a lot, and when I teach children's art, naturally I have to break things down simply so that they're much easier, the concepts are easier to grasp. And one thing that works very well is to break things down into very simple shapes and forget all of the extra stuff that you don't need to think about really. So when we think abstractly about the shape of a cow, we can say the head looks like an inverted equilateral triangle. Can you see that? The ears actually stick out pretty far. It's like an upside down triangle. And the body is very much like a rectangle. So if I draw something like this, and I add some legs, very simple legs, it already looks like a cow, especially if I put a little bit of black. So if you want to go very, very abstract, something this simple will give you something that looks like a cow. Now if we take that further and we think about that inverted triangle and we want to make it look more like the head of a cow, we're going to break this side into 3 parts. So we've got this long side now is the horizontal side is broken into thirds by these 2 marks, and we're going to put an ear here, and an ear here, and a little top of the head comes up over the horizontal line. And of course cows don't have triangular noses, so we're going to put a rectangle in there and just bring this down like so. Little nostrils in, put eyes right up here on the side of the head, and there you go, cow head, that easy. Again, we can think about the rectangle shape. We can bring the front of the cow's chest down a little bit like this, tummy goes up and down, and then we can add the legs, and it looks even more like a cow now. Cows are a lot of fun to do. Okay, with that introduction on how to draw a cow, I'm going to go right into the painting. So what do we need when we paint with acrylics? First of all, we need to have our surfaces covered because acrylic, once it's dry, is very difficult to remove. So I have my tabletop covered with paper. I have my floor covered with an old sheet. I have not my best clothes on. I'm going to try to keep the paint off of my blouse. Don't paint in your good clothes, please. I have my paint palette. A lot of you will have paints that we sent home, and so they're in a styrofoam plate. You can turn the lid upside down and use the lid as your palette. It will look like a plate, right, once you turn it upside down. You can use that plate as a palette for mixing colors. What I have here is called a wet palette, and I use this all the time when I paint with acrylics. What it is there's a sponge underneath the semi-permeable membrane, and the sponge is full of water, and it keeps the paints moist so that they don't dry out. And I can put the lid on this palette and use the paints for about a week before I have to make a fresh set of paper and paints. So let's take a look at the colors that we have. White, we always need a lot of white when we paint. Well, we usually do. White's a very, very important paint. We use it to mix a lot of other colors. It lightens everything, so if we wanted to make a light blue, we need white in there. If we wanted to make a light brown color, we wanted white into our burnt sienna. White into black will give us gray. White into red will give us pink. So white is a very, very important color. We also have black, red, orange. This is called burnt sienna. It's a very lovely color. This is cobalt blue. It's actual cobalt blue, which is a little different than the cobalt that was used to paint this painting. This is not real cobalt blue. This is. So it's going to look a little bit different when I paint the sky. This is a olive, it's actually called chrome oxide green, or sap green. Sap green is very close. This is sap green, so sap green. And then this is a yellow green, which I don't use in my palette, but because I had used it in the demo painting, I went ahead and picked some up from the art center. You can see that it's actually thinner paint than the ones I use, so on the wet palette the water is actually diluting the paint a bit and it's starting to run, but that'll be fine. Now, as far as brushes, you will want a wide brush. This is about 1 inch, and this is a flat brush. It's flat on top. I also have others, smaller ones. I love this. This is my favorite brush. It's an inch. It's a 1/2 inch bright. Bright means it's shorter than a flat, and the bristles are nice and stiff. I like bristle brushes with stiff bristles. This is one that's almost worn down. So I have a number of brushes here, and I'll be using them interchangeably in my painting. It's always a good idea to start with the biggest brush that you have when you're doing these areas where you've got lots of blue, for example. We'll want to use a bigger brush, and I usually use one that's even bigger than this, but I'll start with this one because I think this is probably the largest size that you'll be using. If you have a bigger one, by all means use it when we do the sky and the gray and some of the building, the green. So always start with the biggest brush that you can, and then when you find that brush is not able to get into tight spaces, then you can go down to a smaller brush. So I'm going to start with this brush, and I'm going to start with the sky. Now, one way to paint the sky would be, if you use the cobalt blue alone, it's going to be very, very bright. You want blue, blue, blue. That's going to take over your whole painting. You want to paint the whole sky blue. If you want to have something that's not quite that eye-catching, you will want to mix it with white. And you can see the difference between here and here, where the white's mixed in. It's much less eye-catching. And this is something that you'll notice when you go outside and look on the sky. When you see the sky up above you, it's going to look bluer than when you look at the sky near the horizon. And I try to incorporate that into skies when I paint. I always have the higher part of the part that would be more overhead will be a brighter blue than the blue that's on the horizon. So what we're looking at is blue without white mixed into it, and blue with white mixed into it, and blue with more white mixed into it. I'm also going to leave an area of cloud, and you can either not paint that part because the canvas is already white, or you can go into it a little bit with the white paint, and I'll show you how to do that. In addition to the paints and the brushes, we need a couple containers of water. I always use 2 so that I can rinse my brush first in one container to get most of the color out, and then I have a cleaner rinse. And then you'll want some paper towels to be able to blot your brush when you're done rinsing it, because that'll take out the extra water. If you have too much water in your brush and you go back into the paints, you'll start diluting your paints and they'll all be runny like this one. And then it's a little bit harder to manage the paints, getting them from here up to your canvas. I also would recommend that you use an easel if you have one. It's much easier to paint when something is holding your painting in an upright position. All right, so let's get going here. I'm going to start by putting some blue in the sky, and I'm going to go into the white as well. And I'm going to be mixing the white right on the canvas. So let's start out here. Go ahead and get your paintbrush, your largest one, and go into your blue, pick up a bit of white, and go onto your canvas. Now when I paint, I actually like the colors to kind of go here and there. I don't just make my brush strokes all in one direction. And I like to vary the color by adding the brighter blue in some areas and some white in other areas. And when I paint, I really push the paint into the canvas. I'm going to leave a space for the cloud. Now my painting that I'm doing here is not going to look exactly like the other one. Yours is not going to look like mine. You could paint your cows different colors, and it's actually impossible for me to paint the same thing twice. So I know that you won't want to paint the same thing that I painted. Not exactly. So I'm so far painting around the cloud, where I want to put the cloud, in a very rough manner. And as I come down here to where the cloud is going to be, I'm going to pick up a little bit of white, and I'm just going to put that white where the cloud is, and I'm going to allow the leftover blue pigment that's in my brush to mix into the white. I'm not mixing it very, very well on the canvas because I want it to look like a nice white fluffy cloud. Coming down the side of the tower there. So I'm going back into white and just putting some of that white into the cloud shape. We don't want our cloud to be only white. We wouldn't want it to be only gray. Have all these wonderful colors. I'm going to work on the other side of the tower now. Oops. Now I'm working into the sky under the cloud. I'm going to go back into the white, and I'm going to lighten the sky under the cloud. So now at this point, I'm going to go into the water and rinse off the brush because I want to use a lot more white and a lot less blue now. And the blue that is in my brush is going to prevent me from having a nice light blue on the horizon. So into the white, and I'm just going to be pulling the color that's already on the canvas down towards the horizon. Coming down to the top of those buildings. And the 7-Up sign. Trees. I'm just going to go back up here and mix in a little bit of that blue and bring it down just a touch. And over here. Okay. Just adding a little bit of white to this dark area here. A little bit of white to the edge of the cloud. The next thing we're going to do now is we are going to mix up some gray. We're going to stay with our large brush for as long as possible. We're going to mix up 3 sorts of gray. We're going to mix up a darker gray to do the road, and then a medium gray to do the curb. Actually, that's a light gray over there. Medium gray for the curb on this side, and maybe a couple of the buildings in the background, and then a lighter gray for the sidewalk here and the curb on the other side. So gray would be white with black, and you can probably just mix very little bits of black with the white that is next to it. I'm going to actually move some white over here because my green is coming in between. I don't want to get green in my gray. So I'm going to start out with a medium gray. slightly on the darker side. And we'll need a fair amount. If you have a palette knife, of course, it's a little bit kinder on your brushes to use a palette knife for mixing, but I tend to use my brushes. I use these Dick Blick Master Stroke brushes, and they're pretty sturdy. These are my favorites. Having said that, this one isn't actually one of those. Okay, so this color down. And with a large brush and lots of color, it should go on pretty fast. So kind of using this opportunity to clean my brush a little bit. I'm getting some of that extra paint out of the bristles as I go. Paintbrushes can hold a lot of paint, and it's paint that gets wasted if you don't have a place to put it. And this is the perfect opportunity for me to get that gray out of the bristles now. Okay, so my brush is much cleaner than it was. Now I'll just use the tips and paint. Pull the color along. Now the reason that I love flat brushes is because they're very versatile. When I paint like this, I can cover a lot of space pretty quickly. But the space between the cow's legs is a tight space. And if I turn my brush to the side, I'm able to get into those tight spaces. If I use my brush this direction, I cover lots of ground. So it makes a mark like this. When I turn my brush this direction, it makes a very narrow mark. And the narrow marks are very useful for getting into tight spaces. So I'm going to go in between the legs of the cow. I'm going to go Now when you paint the gray, it doesn't have to be perfect, because when you paint the black and the white of the cow, or whatever colors you're using for your cow, you can paint over some of the gray. So it doesn't have to be perfect. That's a great thing with acrylics, is you can paint over things. Much more difficult to do with watercolors, but acrylic can go right over what you've already painted as long as you let it dry, which doesn't take too long. The same is true for oils. You can paint over oils, but you have to wait longer for them to dry. Which is one of the main reasons that people who work with acrylics love them, because they dry quickly and they're versatile. So again, watch how I turn my brush this direction to get into tight spaces, going around the cow and under the ear. But then when I get down to this area, I turn my brush more towards the side so I can cover a large space quickly. Just covering up some of these thinner bits. I'm purposely picking up a little bit of the white as I go, and that just sort of in the same way that I did the sky, it just adds a little bit of interest by making this gray not just one kind of gray, sort of blended in now with some of this lighter gray, very, very subtly. Now I'm going to go into a lighter gray as I get towards the horizon line, just as I went for a lighter blue in the sky as it came down towards the horizon line. So I'm taking the gray that I mixed, and I'm going to pick up a little bit more white and bring that white in as well. And I'm going to use this gray up here. And also for the cross street. Pick up a little bit more of the darker green. At this point, I'm rinsing out my brush, and I'm going to set it aside and pick up my favorite brush, which is a bit smaller. Let me see if I can get that curve in there. I'm looking for a gray that's slightly darker. Darker or lighter, it just needs to look different than the road. And I'm going to mix up more white into this gray. And I'm going to try to get a light gray that I'm going to use on the sidewalk. I want it to be different than this gray. Put some more white into it. Painting around the trunk of this tree. I think I'll lighten that when it dries. I'm going to use some of the same gray to do the curve on the other side. And again, I want that to be lighter, so I'm going to add more white. I'm just going to add some white right onto the canvas here and blend it into this gray. And then with some of this very light gray, I'll just give an indication of some buildings in the background, and the very, very back. And also paint around the Mexican restaurant, paint the pavement. And now what I need to do is lighten this line. Otherwise it draws too much attention to itself. It's just a piece of curb. All right. Next thing we're going to work on is the building. And the color for the building is going to be a very, very light burnt sienna. So I'm going to take, your white is near the burnt sienna, so it's easy to mix. You can just bring the white that is touching the burnt sienna into the burnt sienna. You will want a lot more white than burnt sienna to get this very, very light color. Okay, so I have got a good color here, and I'm going to put that down on the canvas very lightly. I don't want to put too much paint down at this point. I want to be able to kind of see through the paint because it's almost a white building. And then we can use that same color, maybe with a little bit more white, to do the side of the tower. And then we can put a little bit more burnt sienna into it. Not too much more. And we can use that here on the pavement. We can also use it over here. Maybe a little bit more burnt sienna in it to do the tree trunks and branches. Now to do branches, it's very easy just to pull up lightly. Don't press down on your brush, just pull up and let the bristles barely touch the canvas. You should be able to get a little bit of paint without much effort. And if you just pull those strokes up like you were running your paintbrush along some branches, you'll get something that looks like a tree. Okay, there's a trunk back here. And then again, I'm going to pull up. And then I'm also going to be painting the soil there's a little trunk there, in the planter area. So I'm going to need more white now. So I want that to look different than the trunk. You can see my brush really needs to be cleaned at this point. All right, we've been painting for about 45 minutes. So at this point, I think we'll take a little break and then we'll come back to our painting of cows on Main Street. See you soon.
Hey, it's me again. Don't forget to post a photo of your painting with the hashtag #MercedPaintNight on our Facebook or Instagram pages to be entered into the raffle and for the People's Choice Award. The winner of the People's Choice Award will receive a MAC tote bag with a MAC mug and a Bear Creek Ukulele Society at the MAC shirt, and a gift certificate for 2 for a live and in-person Arts and Spirits for when the MAC reopens. The winner of the raffle will receive tonight's original painting signed by Lisa.
Hello, welcome back to Paint Night. And we are now going to be working on the background buildings in this part of the painting, and we'll work on this part as well. When we finish that, we just have some trees left and then the cows in the foreground and middle ground. But we want to make sure that we get this area in before we go on to the cows. Now, if you're doing a field of grass with your cows in the field, you can go ahead and do that part while I'm working on the buildings here. For those of you that are painting the theater and surrounding area, you'll want to be using a small brush. So I've switched over to my my smaller flats. And the first thing I want to do is, I think I'm going to mix up a little bit of light green. There's some trees in the distance here, some small trees, and I'm just going to put those in. I think I will go ahead and take this green with a little bit of white in it. So I'm working with my Sap Green and white. I'm just going to put some of those shapes in the background very, very lightly. It doesn't have to be tree shaped. Just a little bit of brush strokes will indicate a tree. One on this side too. And then I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to go into the white and burnt sienna mix. I'm going to pull some little trunks down from this area. I'm also going to work on the 7-Up sign. For the color of the sign, I want to work with a sort of a dark, dull red. And I think if I take some red with a little bit of burnt sienna and mix that together, I'll get a dull red, which will work pretty well. And you can use the bright red if you like, but it will cause your eye to be really drawn to this area. Now that is still very bright, so I'm also going to take some white and mix that in. Just mixing on the canvas here. So it's not overwhelmingly attention grabbing. Now I'm going to come back with just a tiny bit more color into it. And the bottom of the sign is white. Instead of painting that little strip white and white down here, what I'm going to do is fill in the color around it so that the white from the canvas will show through, because there's no need to paint that little area white. So I'm just going into my light blue, put a little bit more white in it. I want it to be very light. I'm just going to paint here. And then some more white so I can kind of blend that blue into the sky behind. That's about the effect I'm looking for. And I'm going to take some of the gray color and bring that background gray up just a bit. suggestion of a gray building back there. Now I'm going to mix a pink color to go onto the Mexican restaurant back there. So I'm going to need some of this red and some white. Not very much red. It's very easy to make a dark pink when you're mixing pink by adding too much red. It's always better to start with the white and pull a little bit of red into it until you're happy with the color. I'm going to paint the ends of these buildings pink. And that's going to dry pretty dark. So I'm going to pick up a little bit more white and just mix it into the pink on the canvas. Now I'm going to mix up some dark brown. I just realized there's a tiny bit more pink we need. Right here. Now we're going to get some dark brown for the roofs. And as you can see, there's no brown on our palette. There's sort of a reddy brown, this burnt sienna, but what we're going to do is actually mix a brown with some orange and blue. That will give us a nice brown to work with. If your brown looks too orange, like this, it just means you need more blue. If it looks too blue, it means you need more orange. But you can get a really nice brown by mixing orange and blue together, especially cadmium orange and cobalt blue, which is what I've got here. So there's a nice brown. This color looks good. And I'm going to use that back here on my roof, the rooftop. And this little piece of roof here as well. And I'm also going to use it on these windows. And I'm going to put some inside this archway. This archway as well. And then I'm going to put a little bit of white into part of that brown. Lighten it up just a bit. It's kind of mixing with some of that lighter burnt sienna, but that's all right. And I'm going to make some tree branches, some trunks and branches. This brown. Remember how we pulled the shape of the branches, bringing our brush upwards. And this brush doesn't hold as much paint as the one I was using earlier, so I'll have to dip my brush back into the paint a few more times. I'm also going to use this color, the darker brown, down here, to give some indication of doorways. And shady parts of the marquee. And then I'm going to bring some of my burnt sienna into the mix. And we're just going to make some rectangle shapes down here. To very abstractly indicate that there's that this is the bottom of the theater. I'm going to wipe off my brush and go back to this brown color here. I'm just trying to make some different colors that will kind of give us the feeling that this is the bottom of the theater. I'm going to go into a sort of a gray-brown color. And paint the shadow in the archway. And then I'm going to use an almost black version of that color to paint this area here. And likewise here. The next thing I'm going to do is put the hedge shapes in, these two green, very abstract looking hedges. And I'm going to use that sap green. I'm going to use the darker sap green in this case. And I'm just going to put these in where they seem to go, right about here. In here. And then I'm going to mix up that terracotta color, that sort of lovely, rich, burnt orange color. And I'm going to put that in here and some up on top of the tower and along the marquee. So let's make some of that color now. We're going to take some of the burnt sienna and pull it down, and some of this cadmium orange, and we'll mix them together. I'm not taking all of the cadmium orange into all of the burnt sienna, just some of it, so I can always pull a little bit more of one of the other in if I think it is too orange were too close to burnt sienna. Let me see about that color. Looks pretty good. So I'm going to use this color, and I'm going to start by putting a little bit of roof here on this shape. A little trapezoid. And I'm going to start putting some of the marquee color in there as well. Now, if I feel that color is too dark, I can always just go into the white alone and mix that in on the canvas. I do a lot of mixing on the canvas. I like the look of the variation in color. And down here, likewise, we'll put a little bit of white. And we can also, let's put some up here on this roof piece. We're going to have to modify the shape just a little bit with a clean brush. So I'm going to rinse my brush out well. And just use a wet brush to sort of move the extra paint off of this piece here. And then I'm going to think about the top of the tower. I can do the same thing with the top of the tower. I can put some of this terracotta. If you want, you can paint it red. You can paint it terracotta. You can actually paint it any color you want. I love the orange and blue combination, so when I use this terracotta, which is basically an orange, and it's up there with the blue in the sky, I think it looks really striking. Now what we're going to do is think about the tower itself. And there's two things I want to tell you about the tower. And first of all, I am not going to be writing Merced on the side of the tower in two places. It's very difficult to paint words, especially when it's going to have to fit in this space. And I think really in painting, sometimes we want to let our brains think about what we're seeing. And if we don't write Merced, it actually makes it a little bit more interesting because you have to recognize That is the theater, and then you have to remember that it says Merced across the top there. And we're just going to leave it without the name. Maybe we can pencil in some of it after it dries, but we're not going to try to paint Merced up there. What we are going to do is mix a light color similar to this one to put on one side of the tower. And again, we did that with a very little bit of burnt sienna and white. So let's mix up some of that. And we're going to put that on this side. Going to pick up a little bit more white and mix it on the canvas. And I can also use some of this color here in the front. And also on this outer wall here. And I'm going to go back into the white, and I'm going to get some more paint, and I'm just going to mix that in. And then we're going to look at the other side there. That side is going to be a little bit darker. We're going to use some of this brown that we mixed up. And we're going to put a lot of white over here and a little bit of that color. Maybe just a touch of blue. Let's see how that looks. That's not bad. Maybe just a tiny bit more brown. Okay, and with this color, we're going to paint this side of the tower. That might be a little bit dark, so I'm going to take some white and mix it in. And then we just want to add a couple of these little shady areas I'm going to go a tiny bit of blue into that color we just mixed up. And I'm going to paint this little detail on the side here. And I'm going to paint a little detail on the other side too. Just a tiny bit of blue in there. Maybe a bit more than that. I still need to paint the top of the roof there. And I think I'm going to use this color here with a bit of white in it. And maybe a little bit more burnt sienna. I'm going to add the white on the front of the marquee where we would see the listings of the shows. And now I think we're about ready to work on our cows. So I'm going to start with, I think I'll start with a different brush. I'm going to start with my little worn out bright. I'm going to thin down some of my black a little bit. And I'm going to start with some of these difficult to paint areas. And I'll switch over to my bigger brush when I get to a place that has a larger area to paint. I'm starting with the black. I'm going to grab my larger brush. Pick up some of the black here. So I'm using my small brush as a liner brush as well as a filler brush. So I'm filling in shapes, but I'm also using it to draw lines. don't have to put too much detail in this cow back here because he doesn't have so much attention drawn to him. He's sort of in the background. And just do enough so that we notice him, but not so much that we spend a lot of time looking at him. All right, so we've got our black placed. We're going to have to rinse our brush really well because we don't want to get our black into the white. In fact, I think I'm just going to not use these brushes. I'll come back to the white in a minute. Let's go ahead and put the green in the trees now. So we're going to start with the sap green, and we're going to think about the shape of this first tree here. Now it's going to cover some of the tree behind, which is fine. And I can make those a little bit distinct by changing the green with just a little bit of white. And I'll put a little bit up here too. And then we're going to come over here and we're just going to put some different sort of tree. Put some little leaves on there. Put a little bit of white in that sap green. It'll show up on the blue. And let's just go ahead and put a little color on our sap green hedge. I'm going to dry out my brush really well and pick up some of this yellow green and just put some of that on the outer part of the tree that might be getting some sunlight. maybe a tiny bit on the edge. A little bit up here. Now we're going to mix up a little bit more pink. So remember, we want to start out with white and pull just a little bit of red into it. And with this color we can paint the noses of our cows. And I'm going to clean out my brush really well. In fact, I'm going to change brushes and I'm going to go into the white and I'm going to work on some of these white areas. Remembering that the black might still be wet. So go carefully around the edges. In fact, you don't really need to paint the white areas white since the canvas is white already. But if you would like to, this is a good time to do it. I'm just going to fix the head of the small cow there. His ears are very large. Take care of that. I think we're almost there. Now, one thing I want to do before I finish is just have a quick look at my painting and see if I've forgotten anything. And one thing I can see straight away is that my cows need some nostrils. And I'll do that with some diluted black paint and a thin paintbrush. Very small paintbrush compared to what I normally use. Now with this paintbrush I can also just do a little bit more detailing in the face. No need to do too much. I also would like to write 7-Up on the sign in the back. And for that I have a very, very, very fine brush called a liner brush. And I'm going to thin down some of the white paint. Just use this bit here. I want it to be nice and thin. And with this brush I can make a very fine line. I'm just going to write. Put some little bubbles. I also want to darken the soil in the planter box a bit. I'm going to put some of that nice dark brown that we mixed up in with some of the burnt sienna and then a little bit of white. They're not really planter boxes, but these areas where the trees are growing. I'm going to do a tiny touch up on this curve. More white. It's the same color as the street gray. I need to bring it a little bit white. I think I want to do a little bit more here. Around the ear of this cow. And then this doorway. I want to do something about this blue up here. It's pretty dark on one side of the tower and not on the other. So I'm just going to lighten it a little bit in here with some light blue. I'll just bring that right over the dark blue that I already put in there. And I think we have it. Cows on Main Street. Main Street, Moo-ced. I hope you enjoyed this paint night. And before we leave, I just forgot to tell you, you should always sign your paintings. I have a long name. I'm going to try to put my name right there. There's a lot of space for you to sign your painting. And I'm going to use the liner brush again. Whenever you use the liner brush, you want to dilute your paint because that way it flows a lot better. And I'm going to very carefully try to write my name. There we go. Make sure when you're done that you wash your brushes really well because acrylic paint is really hard to get out of your brushes after it dries. You should always wash your brushes immediately after using acrylics. Also make sure that any other things that you are using with your acrylics are washed well. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that. Goodbye.
Thank you for joining us tonight. All of us at the MAC can't wait to see you in person again. Don't forget to visit all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, to stay up to date with all that is happening virtually at the MAC. Until next time, be well, stay safe, and we will see you soon.